Hey, Gen Max, I'm really excited about today's video. We are talking about mistakes that people make when buying real estate, when foreigners are buying real estate in Mexico. So this might be something that you can do. You can watch this to avoid these mistakes. And I've got Jason Waller with me. He is the CEO of Christie's Real Estate Mexico Luxury Properties. And let's pop him on the screen now alongside me. He is over on the other side of the country, and he is in Playa del Carmen, right, Jason?
Yeah, well, Puerto Venturas. It's like 20 minutes south of Playa del Carmen, but it's a small place, and most people don't really know it exists. So, yeah, Playa del Carmen would be the closest big city.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I was out there not too long ago, but I want to dig into this video actually before we even really introduce you a little bit. Let's start with the first thing that you would say, that the first mistake that foreigners make when buying property in Mexico.
Not using a proper realtor. That's the problem we have out here is there's so many bar stool realtors out here, right? Where you're having a margarita somewhere and you're sitting beside somebody who says, "Yeah, no, I got some properties I can show you," and they have no idea what they're doing, and you end up buying something that doesn't have title or is under construction and not trustworthy. So it's really important just to get with an internationally branded realtor like Christie's International Real Estate.
Okay, yeah, that is a great point. That was going to be my bonus tip in case you didn't talk about it. It was more so about not having a realtor at all, because a number of people will go with like a pre-construction or something like that, where the property is not being built, or maybe it's not even being built yet. Maybe it's just coming out of the ground, but there's a developer who is selling these and is selling direct to the customer. You want a realtor in that situation, and an international
Exactly.
realtor too. So
Exactly. And the other thing that we see all the time too is like Facebook groups where someone's saying, "I'm selling my property direct. Talk to me, avoid the realtors, save 6% on when you buy." But then you have nobody protecting you, nobody making sure it's okay. You don't even know if that's a good deal, if there's other options that are better next door or anything, right? So it's so important to work with somebody who's, we've been out here for 21 years. So you need someone on the ground who knows what's going on. And, you wouldn't do that at home. You wouldn't just walk around and buy something. So you shouldn't do it in a foreign country either.
yeah, and it's tempting though. It's tempting. You see that online, you see something and you're like, oh, I fell in love with this. But you're right. There's so many reasons to have a realtor with you, especially when you're buying internationally.
There's certain finished buildings that have been completed that aren't built properly, right? And you would not know. So you could easily go and they didn't put the proper structure in when they were building it, and you wouldn't know anything. So if you didn't talk to somebody who knows what's going on, you could be sitting there and all of a sudden it drops down 3 feet one day, which we have had happen in a couple of buildings, and you don't want that.
Yeah, that's so true. I think also going with someone who has some time under their belt in the city where you're looking. So ideally, it's someone who has some experience there, so that they've seen some of the buildings, they've come across some of the problem buildings, they know which of the properties have water rights or don't have water rights, or there's a number of little things that exist that an experienced real estate agent is going to know about if they're experienced in that town.
100%. It's so important.
So before we get to number two, why don't we introduce you a little more properly? So you said you've been around in Playa del Carmen selling real estate for 21 years. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about you and your relationship with Christie's?
All right. Well, originally I'm from Canada, Winnipeg. I came on vacation a couple times out to Playa del Carmen in 2003, 2004, fell in love with the place, went back home during a blizzard and decided this is not the life for me. The Caribbean lifestyle is way more appealing. So 2005, I moved out here. And after the first year, I started my own company, and we ran that for 19 years, just over 19 years. And then just over a year ago, we got the opportunity to rebrand with the Christie's International brand. And with the competition going on these days, a lot more realtors out here, a lot more brokerages. The idea of being a luxury brand, one of the top luxury brands in the world, really, was really attractive for us. So we made the move, and it's been great ever since. We've been covering the area of the Riviera Maya, the East Coast, from Cancun all the way to just before the Belize border. And now we started expanding into other areas. We're in Merida, Progreso, Acapulco, Mexico City, and we've got agents in all different areas throughout Mexico, so we can really help people really almost anywhere in Mexico, all the top places anyway.
Yes, that is true. There's a lot of Mexico, and then there's the Mexico where people are buying real estate. Foreigners are buying real estate, especially luxury properties. So there, that does start to limit where people are going. So great, thank you for that. And maybe you could tell us what another mistake is that foreigners make when purchasing or looking for real estate in Mexico.
Well, luckily, most of these mistakes can all be avoided just by finding a good realtor to start with, but because they'll guide you in the right direction if they know what they're doing. Again, some of them out here do not know what they're doing, but if they know what they're doing, they'll guide you in the right direction. Using a proper lawyer, you can go directly with a notary and handle everything, but especially if you don't speak any Spanish, you're not going to know what's going on. Some of the notaries might speak some English, but you want somebody there to hold your hand through the whole time. We started our own law firm 4 years ago. We just felt the necessity to have a good in-house team. So we've got 3 full-time lawyers that work out here and help us with all the closings and immigration. And having them hold your hand, speaking the language that you speak makes such a difference. It gives you more security, makes you feel safe when you're doing it. And you don't make any mistakes because they're going to check all the paperwork. They're going to double check everything, make sure all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted. And that's the best way to protect yourself, is to have someone there step by step that knows the laws, can help you through the process.
Yeah, so maybe you could tell us what the difference is between a lawyer and a notary, because back in the United States, at least, I don't know how it works in Canada, but when people think of a notary, it's a person who stamps a document and just says, yes, this is your signature. And that's different in Mexico.
Yeah, notaries here are way up. They're the top of the food chain, and they take care of everything, and nothing happens legally without the notaries being involved. So yeah, with the notaries being the top of the food chain out here, you want a good lawyer that has a good reputation, a good relationship with a notary, so they can work together and make sure everything is done properly. The lawyers strive to become a notary one day, so they work hard at that. And once they get to the point and have the right connections, and that's usually the next step they try to get to. But yeah, you want to make sure that you have a good combination between the two of them to help you through the process.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because I've always thought of like notaries as being like super lawyers or something like that. They've got a lot more writing on it, and they're the way they're working with documents. They're kind of like almost quasi-governmental, in that the government puts a lot of trust in them to get the documents right, I guess. So. Let's move on from the notary / lawyer. So that was point number 2. What's another common mistake that foreigners make when buying real estate in Mexico?
Not using escrow. And again, just like the notaries, escrow is different here as well. So with an escrow account here, what we do is we open an escrow account. We get the lawyers open up an escrow account, and any money that you send for your purchase goes into this escrow account, and it's held. You have an escrow contract that you sign that states when the money can be released, where it can go. It'll go to the seller. Payments will be made to the realtors. Any outstanding bills and everything, will make sure it's all at zero before you close on the property. If you just send your money blindly to the seller, what's to stop them from just walking away with your money? And we have to fight sometimes. It'll cost $500 to set this up, and we usually get the buyer to do it, because they're the ones that need the most protection. And they argue sometimes, and they don't understand. They're like, no, but I can just send it right to the seller. And I'm like, well, yeah, but then nobody's protected. With escrow, everybody's protected. Once the closing happens, the money goes exactly where it's supposed to go. It doesn't go beforehand. So you don't really want to send hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to somebody you don't know, and with the hopes that everything's going to go okay. So it's super important. We always use escrow for every deal we do. And if we don't, if the buyers insist they do not want to do it, we'll try again and push as hard as we can, because in the end, we don't want to look bad, right? If we do something and if they don't do what we're advising, we can look bad in the end of the day. And we don't want that. We don't want people losing their money. We don't want, issues. We want everything to go smoothly and everybody to be happy. This is a dream for a lot of people. We want to help them achieve that dream.
Yeah, that is such a great point. So, and one of the things that I've always found interesting is that sometimes, and maybe I'm wrong with this, but it seems like the last time we purchased property, because we purchased from someone from the U.S., is that the escrow account was set up in the United States, and the money never actually seemed to step foot, or if money had feet, in Mexico. The transaction seemed to all happen north of the border.
First of all, it does have feet because my money is always running away. So 100%.
Yep.
But yeah, we can set up escrow accounts anywhere. We can set them up in different currencies too: U.S. dollars, Canadian dollars, pesos. So there's a lot of options. So whatever you feel most comfortable with, that's how we can do it.
That's great. Great to know. So, how about another mistake? What other things? I'm sure you've seen lots of mistakes. So, what other things, or seen almost mistakes because you've probably guided people away from them?
Pre-construction. Pre-construction can be great. You can find yourself an incredible deal on a beautiful property, and it turns out just amazing. And again, this all goes back to my first point with having a good realtor, because you need to rely on somebody who can advise you and say, okay, this developer didn't finish the last project. This developer finished it, but the quality was terrible, or this developer's amazing. We work with them all the time. They have the money in the bank. They can finish the property without sales. That's extremely important. You don't want somebody who is relying strictly on the sales of property, because if they don't sell, they won't finish the building. So they could have sold 50% of it and then not have enough money to complete it. So we got to be very careful. We only work with trusted companies that we know, always finish what they're doing, do a good job, and that way you don't get stuck. There are cases that have, over the years we've heard some scary things have happened when people have put money in and then all of a sudden the construction just stops, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, I see something like that happening down the beach from me. There's a tower, supposedly like a 7-story tower or something, that's going in a few doors down the beach from me. And they've got the big signs, the fancy signs and things like that. But it just, none of the realtors will sell the condos pre-construction. They're definitely for sale. I saw them out there and they were mixing concrete in like buckets, like 5-gallon buckets. And I think they were just trying to show some forward momentum on the project. But I was like, you're not going to build a 7-story building if you're pouring your foundation bucket by bucket.
It's going to take a long time.
Yes, exactly. So they exist. I'm just hoping they don't get to the point where it just becomes an eyesore.
And then you got to watch for permits too. Some of them just think that they can breeze through the environmental permits, and in Mexico, the environmental department is very strong. And if you're doing something, they could shut down your construction. They could make it so you never get title, right? So you just got to be very, very aware. You need people on the ground. You need your brokers. You need your lawyers. You need everybody who knows what's going on, just to say, yes, this is safe. This is okay. Avoid this project. Even on our websites, we will list some of the projects that we won't sell. But we do that just so people contact us. And then when they do, we go, well, okay, first of all, we're not going to sell you there. But this is what's going on. This is why we're not interested. But we have something else that's similar, and you can look at these ones. These are safe, So we do get people asking sometimes, why would you even put this on your website if you know it's bad? And it's just to help people, because some unscrupulous people will do a sale just to make the dollars, right? So we want to make sure that they're protected and they have the knowledge, and whether or not they buy with us, we want them to be safe, and we want it to be a fun and happy experience.
Great. Thank you for that. So, more mistakes. I feel like we could probably go on forever, but so just tell me when we should stop. But what else do you got for us?
Yeah, one thing that people need to be aware of is it's not necessarily going to be a super fast closing. Sometimes, they think they're going to come out here and do a week vacation, buy a property, close on that property, and that's not just going to happen, because we have to go through all the paperwork. The lawyers have to do their jobs, the notaries have to do their jobs. And when you're dealing with governments, there's slowdowns, things take time. You're looking, 45, 60 days from start to finish until you actually close on the property, if it's completed property. If you're buying pre-construction, it's a year or two, because you're not going to close until that property is finished. So the mistake of coming down and thinking you can do everything in 1 week is just not likely. It's not going to happen. So you need to prepare. You need to come down, look at properties, and then expect to come down at another time. to do all the signing and everything when on the closing. You can do power of attorney with the lawyers and sign before you leave if you're not going to come back in the next few months. But just be aware that it could take up to 2 months to close. So you'll either need to get that power of attorney signed or come back to paradise for another vacation.
Yeah, I definitely see. We closed during COVID, so it was extra long.
Oh,
So it was 7 months, 7 months, 9 months is what it was to
whoa.
close. So it does happen, and I think because property transactions almost always happen with cash. And up in the United States, the mortgage process is what holds up closing a lot. And people may think, "Oh, there's no mortgage. I've just got my cash in my bank account, and I can just close." There's just a lot more government stuff, and the government does a lot of paper movement and stamping things, and it's a lot of very manual things to do. So closing can take some extra time. And you're right, if it is, if it's not a completed property, the construction can take extra long. So just plan on that. I know a lot of people who come down to the La Paz area that are building brand new homes, and they end up renting for a while, doing an Airbnb or something for a month or two while the finishing touches are put on, so that they can get their, that they can move into their new home. So
yeah, it's probably always going to take a little longer than you think, no matter what it is, because there's always going to be something that's going to slow it down.
Yeah.
But it's an easy process, and if you have the right people in place, you just sit back and let them do all their work, and then you get to close when it's ready to go.
Yeah, and the reason that ours was held up was the fideicomiso, and we'll talk about what that word is in a second, because the fideicomiso wasn't properly handled by the previous owners. They hadn't paid up, and because it was COVID, the office to get that cleaned up was closed. The bank that issued the original fideicomiso was no longer issuing new ones, so that was definitely complicated. But that gets to a mistake I think that people might make if they think that they can't buy property in Mexico. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, about can foreigners even buy property in Mexico?
Yes. In the old days, you would have had to partner with somebody locally, and then hopefully trust them, because they could easily just walk away with your property. So we had so many horror stories in the years and years and years ago. But the government realized that they want foreign investment. They love having Canadians, Americans, Europeans, whoever come in and buying properties and spending dollars out here. So they made the change with the trust system, the fideicomiso. So it's a trust that you open up in the bank of your choice. The lawyers will always recommend the best banks to use, because there's some that are faster, cheaper. It depends. You want the right one. So again, you rely on a good lawyer to advise you on who they recommend using. And then you are covered. You renew it every 50 years. You only have to use that if you're buying within close to the international borders or the coastline. If you buy something interior, you can do it without that. But our lawyers always recommend a trust. You are more protected that way. It's the safest way to buy property out here, no matter where you're buying. And it's not expensive. You pay a yearly fee of a couple $100. You set it up, and you can pass it on in a will. You can sell it. You can give it away. You can do whatever you want, but you have full rights to the property. You own the property, and nobody can take it from you. So it's a very safe way. And like I said, even if you're not buying in the restricted zone, we still recommend going with the trust system, because it just protects you.
Awesome. That's great. I hadn't heard that before. I know it's necessary because we are in that coastal zone too. And it does. One thing I like about the fideicomiso system, or probably the trust system in general, is that it's kind of another layer of protection when you're purchasing the property, is that there are certain properties near my house where the owners will put the property on the market, but then refuse to sell to foreigners. And my assumption there is that something is not right, and it's going to come up through that fideicomiso process.
Exactly. Yeah, that's when you run away.
Yeah, they're waiting for a local Mexican who's going to buy directly from them and not use a real estate agent, and not have a lawyer, and not have the fideicomiso process. So foreigners, because when you're in that coastal zone, there's one extra layer of protection. Plus, they tend to probably go through with a real estate agent, with a lawyer, and people who have questionable title to their land might not want to deal with that. So it's a good thing to stay away from.
which immediately brings up another point then into my mind is Ejido property, community owned properties. That is something that you want to stay away from as well. And that's what you want the lawyers and the realtors to guide you through. People have had many problems. It's possible by Ejido. It's just a lot of work. You have to make sure that every member of that community signs off on it, because if one person doesn't sign off on it and you think everybody's done that, they can just take the property back. You can pay for the property and you don't own it because it's not titled. It's community owned land. So we stay away from that 99% of the time. We only work with titled properties, unless it's something that we know we can get taken care of, and then you can then title the property after. But that's far and few in between. We just really prefer that people look at titled properties that we know they're safe and there's going to be no issues down the road.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know, like in Todos Santos, areas where there's a lot of agriculture, I think, tend to have more Ejido land because that was kind of developed for the community to own the agricultural land. And it does get divided, but sometimes when it switches to, out of the Ejido, it can be titled. But if you're going directly, complicated. And
it can be a considerable expense too to get it titled. So you need to be aware of that. If you're coming in, you think you're going to be able to just title this, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of money, and you have to make sure it's done properly. Otherwise, you could just lose everything. But all the properties we deal with are titled. That's it. And anywhere in the main areas you're going to want to be close to the water, it's all titled. It's typically more deeper into the jungle where you're going to run into these issues.
Yeah. Yep. Well, one other thing that does come up though is, I don't know exactly what it is, but I don't know if it's common at all there in the Mayan Riviera, is these kind of camps where it's a owner of the land and they lease the property to someone who then builds a house on it. The houses usually seem like a really, really good deal, and they are, but you don't own the land, you lease the land, and you lease it from someone who's, typically they own enough land for 30 or 40 properties. Sometimes they provide some good amenities, and, there's often they're off grid and maybe they're providing community electricity, solar or something like that, water. Any thoughts on those properties if they exist over on the East Coast?
We have that here too. We do not recommend it. We will not be part of that. We want everybody to be safe and happy, but we also have to protect our reputation, right? So we're very careful of what we do, what we'll deal with, and things like that scare me. I do not want to deal with that, because you have no idea if the owner tomorrow is going to get an offer from a resort company to sell the whole property and build a resort. And then what are you going to do? Now you're kind of screwed. So we do not work with those. We don't recommend it. We want everything to be safe and happy. We want the experience to be wonderful, and we want you to have your property for as long as you want and enjoy it, and not have to deal with any of these negative issues that can come up. So little things always just to watch. Make sure it's titled. Make sure the seller has full ownership of the property. Make sure there's not other people involved. And again, good real estate agent, good lawyer, and then you'll have no issues. And everything comes back down to that. As long as you have somebody that you can trust working for your benefit, going through everything, then you're good.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, can you give us one last mistake that people make, and then we'll get some of your information so that people can reach out and contact you if they're in the over on the east side, or even in some of those other areas that you mentioned. So last mistake.
Well, we'll go a little calmer and not as big a deal on this one, but just not preparing for what you want in advance. Are you looking for an investment property? Are you looking for a lifestyle property? Are you looking for something to use a couple months here? Are you going to move there? Or, how many people? Just doing your research ahead of time so that once you're with a realtor, they can show you the right properties that work best for you. Because there's a difference between a lifestyle property and an investment property. You may not want to spend as much time at the investment property because it's going to be a popular spot for rentals. But if you want a lifestyle property, that's somewhere you can just go in and enjoy all the amenities, the life that you can lead out here. Our place, we have the canal in the back behind us, which we just love. The boats. I can get a boat to come pick us up right in our backyard. The dog swims in there. It's lifestyle. It's not an investment property per se. So just doing your homework, and that way, when you do connect with a realtor, you can say, okay, here's what I want to do with my life. Here's what I want to do with my property. Here's my 5-year plan. The 5-year plan is so common. I want to rent it out for the first 5 years, and then I'm going to semi-retire and I'm going to spend my winters there.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people do that here too. It's like you want to get kind of locked into something at today's prices, and you're able to Airbnb it out for a while or something like that, and maybe just come down for a few weeks a year, and then have it generate some income until it's time to retire, and then move into it. So
and don't buy for other people. We get that a lot too, where like we're going to buy a 5-bedroom place because the kids are going to come down with their kids, and everybody's going to come down. Nobody ever comes down. We get so many times where they buy this big place and it's just them, and they don't realize that everybody's so busy all the time and they don't have as much time to come down and use it when they want. And so think about yourself. Think about yourself. Don't worry about everybody, your friends, your family, because they're most likely not going to spend as much time out there as you are. So really think about what you want and what you want out of this property before you start looking.
Awesome. Well, great advice. So if people are looking for more advice about real estate, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, we're easy to find because as of today, we are the only Christies in Mexico. There's another one coming, I believe, but as of today, it's just us. So Christie's International Real Estate is the main head office. We are Christie's International Real Estate Mexico Luxury Properties. You can find us online. We have multiple websites. We have Instagram. We have Facebook, LinkedIn, and everything. We try and get out there as much as possible, so you can find us easy.
Awesome. Well, all those links will be down below in the description. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, I want to remind you to do that. If you have subscribed, I'd love it if you shared this video.
I already did.
Okay, perfect. So great. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for being here with us and for sharing these mistakes so that folks can avoid them wherever they buy in Mexico or probably internationally. A lot of what you covered does work internationally, not just Mexico, but some of the stuff like fideicomisos is probably specific to Mexico. But thank you so much, and enjoy the wonderful day. It looks like a gorgeous day over there on your side of the country. And we will be sure to get some videos up on the screen now. I'm just going to pop this up here. So it's just me, and I'll make sure I've got some videos over here that you can watch next. And I've got some things from the Mayan Riviera down here, other realtors up here. Check those out next. And from La Paz, hasta luego.